Salutations, folks. We're actually back again with our show that is Media Universal with Existence. One of the topics that we're actually going to go with today, and again, I'm here with Mrs. Cynthia, and I'm Joe, for those who don't know. We're going to start with relationships or ship in relations. And that would be the battle to agree to disagree. Now, it's much easier when you're in a conversation with someone or an acquaintance or even a friend. But then when it's in a close relationship with someone that you love and that you have been with, some things are pretty hard to just leave at, all right, well, let's just agree to disagree and go on with this, although we'll still be together after shopping and then when we wake up in the morning and still somehow when you're cooking and I'm very hungry and I hope you still agree to disagree. So, you want to start to say anything to it before we start throwing like examples out there?
I personally believe that agreeing to disagree never truly happens. What really happens is you just end up letting it go. But you never really agree to disagree because, well, you have one viewpoint of it and I have another. So we can't really agree. And then I guess that's where compromise comes into play. But if both parties don't lose something in that compromise and gain something in that compromise, then it's still just one person getting in their way and the other one feeling as though they're not.
Okay, I understand that. Well, what I would get to agree to disagree, per se, some will feel, even in a relationship, as we have actually reached certain impasses to where it's kind of funny if it's in thorough detail, but we're not.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, because sometimes you have to admit where even the missus or the mister or whoever your partner is within a relationship. There's some things that they will give to actually reach pretty much compromise, a middle ground, or there's some things that they just won't budge. They won't budge. So some have referred to ways of using a therapeutic approach, so to speak. Then again, some have used other ways to where you'd have your entrapment of, or you'd have certain ways to withhold things and forgetting that well, we're both adults here, so whatever you're withholding, you can keep it. I'm still not going to agree to disagree. Or, I feel this way, you feel that way. I don't even want to say, okay, then part from feeling that way. I'm going to make you feel that way or convince you, or we just can't leave it at the table like this.
But what happens when one person, whether it's him or her or an outside party even, is 100% thoroughly wrong?
Well, that would be based on his views to which, if at its general, per se, if you are in court, a lawyer would generally say yes or no, not specifically with detail of how you can actually bring it to where it would be understood.
So that's where you get
story short, yes.
That's where you get into, well, if it's criminal, you need a beyond a reasonable doubt facility, you need a preponderance of the evidence. But that's not really quite what I mean, though. Like, let's just say, for example, you say the sky is blue. I say the sky is purple. I'm obviously 100% wrong. So how do you agree to disagree on that? You can't agree to disagree on something when somebody is completely in the wrong.
Okay, then how would one tell upon that? That if they would say, okay, well, just because, I don't want to be as right as you, I want to say it's purple because I think it should be purple. I feel it's purple to me is what I want to see. But then this is where you have to take that.
No matter how much I feel like I want it to be purple, or no matter how badly I want it to be purple, or no matter how a colorblind person per se might see it as purple, the fact remains it's not purple.
Yes. But
so they're still wrong.
Would you stand on it? The question is, I guess, would you stand on a dime or would you feel entitled to then insult one from standing on such a firm answer to within it's obvious to it, then, hey, I mean, even if you see it that way and the sky is purple, would you be able to then walk away from them saying, well, I think it's blue. If you think it's purple, I guess you're entitled to think that. If you're gonna ask me if it's purple, saying I should agree, I'm gonna tell you honestly, no, it's blue, sometimes orange, pink, but
Well, the sky can be purple. You've ever seen Purple Sunset? Oh, well, I have. The sky can indeed be purple.
Okay, well,
But not generally.
all right. It is not generally, but you understand what I'm saying, really, right? Would you feel, or even if they would have felt to have cornered you on the dime to say, no, unless you say it's purple, then all that you have to do is in your free will of what you have to do is something will be interrupted because you don't agree.
What?
What? The phrase of the day. What? Again, there's so many ways we can phrase this too. How it would grow into a relationship. So I'm trying to do it by pattern instead of jumping face first into it, to where it could kind of boil some points, but always from a view that a person can respect that, where they do not even agree with one, and not even come to a point of a common ground to agree to leave at his content. It could leave a tension,
You can say that you agree to leave it at its content, but truly, one or both parties are not going to be content.
So how would you part from an agreement if not able to agree to disagree, but part from it within a contentness to say, hey, this will not bring back tension from this single subject or this single conversation?
Well, see, the only way that you could actually maintain that momentary contentness within that conversation, or is if that conversation, you get to a point where you're just like, okay, you know what, you see it one way, I see it another way, we're going in circles, and we're going in circles, and we're going in circles. You're obviously not going to change your mind without further evidence. I'm obviously not going to change my mind without further evidence, and in some cases, even if there is further evidence, you're still not going to change your mind. This is Joseph, but even in some cases with that further evidence, you're still not going to change your mind. So you get to a point where, like, okay, well, I guess the best thing we can do here is just to agree to disagree. You don't like it, I don't like it, but that's just how it goes. The only way you can continue on that momentary contentness or that momentary resolution is if that conversation doesn't get brought up again. It's where you come to leaving the past in the past. So, for example, let's just say we get into a huge argument today about, well, I think you should have done this, or you think I should have done that, or, I disagree about something you did with what you did, or you disagree about something I did. Regardless of how the situation goes, if you don't like something I did, if I don't like something you did, if we don't have the same viewpoint or agree on it wholeheartedly, then yeah, we can say we agree to disagree. But come tomorrow morning, that conversation, it has to be done and over with in order to not revive that tension. And every time you bring up that conversation, that tension that never got resolved, it just builds a little bit more and builds a little bit more and builds a little bit more until you end up in full-out situations that do end up requiring police involvement or outside forces of some other kind, when really it shouldn't come to that. The past is the past, and you can't do anything to change it.
All right. How about giving it to within individual's view assessment per se?
What?
An individual's view per assessment.
Which means?
Say where one would not be able to let go of that tension, or they will let it go at that moment. Okay, agree to disagree for now, but this isn't over. As opposed to where one would find, okay, we have revisited this, and we've constantly revisited, and you think, would you believe that with this, of any argument, by the way, before it seems so interconnected, but, just in this universal way of all over the world, that some do feel that there will be tension, if not an agreement upon a subject, as opposed to when parted and left alone, some could completely put it out of their head, and come back to it and be like sidewinding my way. Well, what are we talking about this for? And why are we coming back on this subject? You know where I stand I know where you stand. We shouldn't be here unless we are purposely trying to bump heads. Have you yourself ever been able to leave from a disagreement, or from agreeing to disagree, or would you have felt within this, whether you agreed or not, you felt that it was imposed upon you to feel that I was forced to agree to disagree at this in its tension, feeling that upon further argument or upon further time within that subject or disagreement, we could have found a common ground?
Oh yeah, no, there was times when I felt as though I've been forced into an agreement to disagree. That happens when one person or another shuts down, or walks away, or refuses to talk about it. Look, just because you're finished talking about it doesn't mean I'm done talking about it. And if we don't agree to be done talking about it at the same time, then one person or the other has in turn been forced into that agreement to disagree.
All right. I guess how would you have regaling that? How would you have went into, I guess, alleviating or within?
Well, see, I'm the type of person, if I want to alleviate that so-called agreement to disagree, and I'm really trying to get somebody to see things from my point of view, I'm going to go do the research, and I'm going to do paperwork, and I'm going to get witnesses, and I'm going to bring everything to whatever person I'm having that agreement to disagree with or that disagreement with. And I'm just going to be like, look, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and this altogether is why I say and feel what I say and feel at the moment about this particular subject. But the fact that said person doesn't even want to address that conversation or even try to come to an actual resolution or a compromise and not just an agreement to disagree. Because an agreement to disagree is not a resolution. Doesn't matter how many times you try, agreeing to disagree does not resolve the problem. That problem still underlies, that problem is still there. You can say 1,000 times, well, I didn't do this, and the other person can say 1,000 times, well, I believe you should have done that, and I can say 1,000 times, I believe I didn't need to do that. Doesn't matter how many times you go through it, that situation is not resolved because it wasn't done the way one party thought it should. The situation will never actually be resolved until you can sit there and actually maybe make progress towards changing that person's mind. Look, this is why I didn't do it this way. This is why I didn't do it this way. This is why I didn't do it this way. All of these things together is why I chose to do it this way. And until you can come to some sort of actual compromise on it and not just an agreement to disagree, the problem is still there. The problem is still underlying. And it's those types of problems that end up 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line. Well, back in 2007, you did so-and-so. So what? 2007 was 10 years ago. 2007 was 10 years ago. What I did 10 years ago has absolutely no bearing on what I did today.
But within this, I totally understand where you're coming from, to where a person within, at that argument, would try to gather their ammo to not only support it, to not only make it credible, but how would you then, if not being able to reach resources, such as, I guess within this opposition of, I would feel within an argument, I would be able to lead and alleviate a way to where, hey, I don't quite agree with you, but within us surrounding subjects with this, we don't have to say, well, okay, take this situation, blah, 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 blah. You know, and then if you bring them here and we can have someone in the audience and they'll agree, and then looking it up at the statistics to where within this common ground of, hey, I need personally to where I see it, I can give it the open mind to not only, some say I'm opening my mind because I listened to it to tell you I disagree with it, to where it would, take more. To some, nothing wrong with or saying or insulting anything about it. But some will say, okay, would you regale further to why you would adamantly be against this, but not with using others?
Okay.
To where, yes, you can use past experiences endured. And what I usually would say with the saying to myself is judge the things that you have endured. through your past till present, to not judge so much outwardly, but to be within ready and awareness to where it could possibly lead to. This way you don't paint yourself as one to settle within a general thought or a general stereotypic, although they're out there. You can get beyond this by saying, yes, obviously I know that there's a stereotypic of, I know that this is that it's about, but it doesn't mean you would specifically as an individual be all about that. And you could still have some stereotypic qualities. Nevertheless, still be as uniquely different as to not just put in a general whole of a category.
Okay, well, sticking on the agree to disagree type thing. When you're talking about, like so and so in this situation specifically, let's take and use a situation as an example. There are a couple of topics I can think of offhand that the country is very, very divided on. One of them happens to be pro-life or pro-abortion. The other one happens to be the death penalty. In both of those situations, you are going to get people that are 100% for the death penalty and people that are 100% against the death penalty. You're also going to get people that are for abortion in certain situations, that are for abortion regardless, and that are completely against it no matter what the situation is.
What about if you were to throw in free will?
See, there we come back to that free will thing. Okay, now this goes into the pro-life and pro-abortion type situation, and from a woman's perspective, especially a woman that has been raped, it was not in her free will to get raped, and therefore it was not in her free will to get pregnant. Her free will was taken away in those cases. Remember, we talked about this on the last show, what happens when your free will is taken away. And now you have the U.S. government trying to say, well, in those situations, we're still trying to take away your free will to not relive that trauma every time you look at your child.
Okay, let's take it within...
I mean, seriously, I know there are some mothers out there and women out there that were able to raise a product of rape. But I also know many, many women that would not be able to bring that child into the world and sit there and look at the man, or look at the face of the man that raped them every single day, all day long, and be willing to actually love and take care of that child. There are some that can, and there are many more that cannot. So where does the U.S. government get to say, well, too bad you were raped because we didn't take him off the streets 5 years ago, you have to live with it?
Okay. Not saying not to put that to the side or belittle, but I'd say, what if we honed into a lot more than, not a lot more than, but within actually taking out government altogether. Like we're talking household, the government of household.
Okay, in that same situation, you have 16-year-old girls that go out and they just want to go out with their friends or go out to a movie or party or do whatever it is they wanted to do, and they themselves, they get molested or raped by people within their households. And then those people within the household say, oh, you either have to get an abortion or you have to have the baby. Where does her free will come in?
Free will do come in at this point of before, though teenager, though at the point of then either choosing to emancipate their teenage, daughter or son into their, where they will be adults at an early time. But I was going to say, honing it into relationships between not, so much where it's forgetting that women will go through points that they will be forced against their will and men. But where would you find within relationships, like I'd say between us, and not specifically between us, but if we was to say a couple between a man and a woman or partners, to where they would feel, hey, I honestly don't really agree with this, to where I know you don't agree with this, to where then would it be wrong to then bring it back up saying, hey, although we're seeing another version of this again, I am noticing within key points that is going to bring about around issues that we specifically do not agree with. So then would that person be wrong to actually say to their partner that they would assessing it, hey, it's not so much of bringing it back up?
But that's exactly what you're doing, though, is bringing it back up.
So then would you say it would be wrong to forget it?
Wrong to forget. I can't really say that I would say it'd be wrong to forget it. You always want to keep, those things in mind, but there are a lot of things at the same time that you should just, honestly, let go of it, just forget about it. There's so many petty things that couples specifically argue about. So many petty things that couples argue about. That it's just, there's no point in reliving this argument day after day after day after day.
Excuse me 1 second. Folks, just don't forget, if you do have, your ideas, or you actually want to call in and actually give your opinion toward it on the topic of today or recent topics and many more topics to come, remember to call Radio Tribune. And he was like, why'd you have to look back at it? Just to make sure there's not enough water. But the phone number is actually 702-984-6843. And again, surrounding it, I'm the boss, I can do this. Great talent. Yeah, this is a good show. I told you, great show. But, please definitely call in, if not during an actual live show, even looking over pre-recordings, and even if you see us out walking around along the streets, and please don't attack us, but you do have a right. You do have a right within to address and say, hey, heard about what you're talking about, and I'd like to elaborate or even be on your show with other topics. Again, if we're at the...
You're okay.
Now, and we're showing, all right? But we'll still keep going on the topic. Just don't forget, call in. We'll definitely listen and like you all to be a part of it from all over. Back to the topic that where it was on agreeing to disagree within that free will to disagree, but within sought at its disagreement to where one would feel, okay, disagree, forget about it, put it out of your head, because if we do come back to such a subject as we're not going to find a common ground. Versus finding out, well, you know what, I still think you're wrong, I can prove that you're wrong, or, oh yeah, I can prove that you're wrong, instead of what I'm trying to grasp and regale within such, to not so much challenge if one is actually so much as wrong or right along the dotted line, but to actually open up an opportunity to learn from what they have to offer within the difference of their views providing to it. And, just saying with that, I guess. Would you like to add any more?
You're in the headlights. I'm still at the point where, an agreement to disagree is not a true resolution. If you're going to agree to disagree, or you and your partner, spouse, significant other, brother, sister, mother, father, auntie, uncle, friend, whatever relationship it is you're in, and you're having that agreement to disagree, once you reach that agreement to disagree, that conversation just needs to be left alone, because you're not going to get any further. And then, if you want to bring it back up, then you try to bring it back up in a neutral setting, in a neutral time, in a neutral place where tensions aren't already high, and don't try to use that agreement to disagree as you said, ammo for your next argument or your next disagreement. But you try to resolve each issue as they come to you. And if that issue can't be resolved, then let it go. And if you can't resolve that issue and you have to let it go, then yeah, it is best to just forget about it. Because there's no point in worrying about what could be. The what ifs. Well, what if this? What if that? What if this? If you spend your entire life worrying about what if, then you're not going to have much of a life to live. If you spend your entire life preparing against, well, what if? What if I go out and get hit by a bus today? Well, I had a good day. Minus getting hit by a bus. So there's no point in worrying about, well, what if I step outside the studio and get hit by a bus? It could happen. Chances are it's not going to.
Not so much to the point of even what if I may, and excuse my manners and my nature on the interruption, but what
This cut me off thing, you know.
I apologize. I was trying to say within it, because you're right. There's no. You would think if used as ammo to say, "Oh yeah," and a rebuttal as a vengeful, impulsive response. But then, how about within using it as a learning technique within what you have learned by going through it to say, although it may seem like we're revisiting, this is what I've taken from this to where if rephrased of trying to honestly understand from your point of view, would we be able to then approach and reapproach it from this aspect? Per se, if instead of me, for example, saying that, you know, you're the reason why I have the headache, you're the reason why I go through this, you're the reason, and instead of pointing out you're the reason, how about rephrasing that back around to, okay, I can understand where I would be mad, totally defensive, you know, and guards up, to saying, hey, I tried to put myself as much in your shoe to where I can understand feeling this way to an extent, but then would you be willing to, along those lines, as I try to say along this in your extent of, you know, saying, you know, me, yeah, I could be wrong or I am wrong because I could have set this off to which have set a, you know, a reaction to where it could even be as small as a tone, you know, small as a touchy subject to where impulse reaction. To where if one does find, even at that point, saying, hey, instead of me starting from my point of view, my opinion, this is how I feel, I don't want to agree with it, I think your way is not so much that it's agreeable. But then revisit it saying, okay, I can understand where we would disagree at. So maybe if I started this way, saying, okay, now, revamp how you approach the subject-based use, the response and rebuttal to such a disagreement, to where I feel if now after better paying attention to it, and where in understanding that it doesn't set a content, it doesn't set a content closure within agreeing to disagree. And if I'm right, is that what you're saying? Like it doesn't set a closure to it if you just agree to disagree.
Of course, the situation is not resolved.
All right. So within
that situation,
within resolving that and its reapproach to saying, hey, then how would you then try to, I wouldn't say draw a person, but give a person that notion that within this, do you still feel and you are entitled to where I want to make sure that I'm not pressing you in a position to where you feel like you had no choice but to agree to disagree, to where you can openly and say, hey, if you'll agree with me to leaving it at this point, I disagree with it. Once coming back to it, I understand how you tried to revamp it from my point of view, to where some may feel even offended at that. They would say, I said it how I said it, I approached it and came across it how I came across it. What needed to be revamped about it? Within rephrases of words to try to see it from one's point of view, to where you kind of have to stop for a minute, let them, reciprocate this, as in I'm not coming back to you with ammo from your point to say now you have to agree, but where felt in respects of if one felt that they had no choice to disagree, no choice but to agree to disagree. How would you then wrap that up? And we're going to wrap it up on here with this.
I really don't know what more there is to say about that subject, except that, unfortunately, in my experience, in 99% of the time, 99% of the situations where a couple or a relationship of any kind has agreed to disagree, and they try to come back to it, it's not usually done in a calm, neutral setting like, okay, well, this is where my point of view is, and I can understand your point of view. Unfortunately, most of the time when situations are revisited, it's done out of anger in tense moments. And so you're still stuck with that point of agree to disagree, and the situation's still not being resolved.
Gotcha. Wrapping up on that again, this is Joseph Johnson and Cynthia Derby. on Media Universal.